interaction, exchange, and sharing of information. It doesn't mean that these three sets of actors only do these three things. What I mean is the primary role of the government is not to create jobs. The primary role of the government is to create an enabling environment to set standards in the society in which the civil society and particularly the private sector can generate job income, goods and services. Now, fostering interaction, relationships, roles and capacities among these three sets of actors is the essence of governance. This is at broad conceptual level. We have to be more specific. What does it mean? The interaction between these three sets of actors. There are two approaches to that. One is what we call which was developed by United Nations Development Program in the UNDP policy paper in 1996, which I had the privilege of drafting in my previous position. I must say though that after I drafted it, it went to the ambassadors of 40 countries and the United Nations. When it came out, it didn't look like what I had written. But essentially, the ideas were there. When it was put in a diplomatic language, given the sensitivities of countries, the central point of that approach is that to improve human development in a country, you need structures, institutions, and processes. Dealing with public sector reform and innovation to provide services. Dealing with electoral and legislative processes to provide political legitimacy. Legal and judicial reform to provide access to justice, equality for all. Transparency, accountability, and anti-corruption to provide information to people, access to knowledge, access to information, and effective use of resources. Number 5, decentralization and local governance, which is especially important in large countries such as India and Indonesia, with many units of government, a large size of the country. So you have to create an effective partnership between different levels of government. And civil society engagement, particularly the role of NGOs in providing services in rural and urban areas. The World Bank came with a second approach, which is more outcome-oriented. And the World Bank, through worldwide governance indicators, identifies 6 dimensions of governance. First is voice and accountability, which means the extent to which citizens can participate in selecting the government. Political stability and absence of violence, which is the perception of likelihood that government will be destabilized or overthrown. These are sort of process dimensions. The third dimension is government effectiveness, which is the quality of public and civil services and credibility of government policy. Number 4, regulatory quality, which is the ability of government to formulate and implement sound policies that permit and promote private sector development. These two reflect the capacity dimension. Number 5 is rule of law, which is the quality of contract enforcement in the society, police force that support the functioning of society, and the control of corruption, extent to which public power is exercised for public goods and not for private gains. For each of these 6 dimensions, the World Bank has set up indicators. Based on that, countries are ranked in terms of their governance ranking in the world. Now, I presented HDI, the concept and the way what it means. Governance, broader concept, as well as how do you assess actually this dimension. The next question, that related question that I want to ask is that, what's the relationship between governance and human development? If you look at this table, we find that in almost all countries, there's a correspondence between World Governance Indicator percentile and HDI, Human Development Report, global ranking. There may be one or two countries which may be a little bit different given the specific situation. Singapore scores the highest in governance on those 6 dimensions of governance of the World Bank in Asia. It also rates highest among the 10 countries that I selected. I did not include Japan because it's a more advanced countries. South Korea, number 2. South Korea also number 2, highest in HDI ranking. Malaysia and these 3 being at the very high level. At the low level, you have, of course, Indonesia, India, Pakistan, Nepal, and Bangladesh. There can be some variations here. You notice here that India rates higher on world governance percentile, but rates lower on human development index. And the reason for that is, in fact, India and Singapore, they explain 2 things. Why is Singapore that high? That's the question I'm often asked. And the reason is that Singapore may not score very high on voice and accountability dimensions, but it scores extremely high on all the other 5 dimensions. You put it together when you want the governance index. India, on the other hand, scores relatively high on both voice and accountability dimension, but it scores very low on other dimensions, the 5 dimensions that I mentioned. So you have this variation, but the central point is that higher the level of governance capacity, the higher the level of human development index performance in terms of the world ranking. In the Arab region as well, we find that the United Emirates is the highest in world governance indicator percentile of the World Bank among the countries that is selected in the region. And it also ranked 35, of course, in 2010 and 32 on HDA, which is the Human Development Index. Jordan and Saudi Arabia, again, being at the upper level, the Syria, Sudan being at the lower level. Now, if you look at Lebanon, you find that this idea doesn't fit. Why? We find that Lebanon ranks is 30.08 World Governance Indicator percentile, but it ranks 83rd in human development, whereas other countries may rank higher on the percentile, but they rank lower on the human development. And I think the reason, obviously, that in Lebanon, because of the very unique governance problem that you have seen, and we have to realize that Lebanon is historically an advanced country. Even in the 60s, it had a particular level, which many countries in this region, even Asia, did not have. Now, looking at the linkage between these 2, and given the fact that governance is a very broad field, I thought it would be desirable to look at one dimension of governance, which comes both in the UNDP approach and the World Bank approach, which is the public sector reform. Now, public sector reform, a key dimension of governance, has tremendous impact on human development, because it can lower costs, speed up response times, increase efficiency, facilitate citizen and staff input, improve service quality, and enable continuous innovation. We find some excellent example of that. Malaysia has invested heavily, consistently over a longer period of time in improving its public sector capacity through a mission-oriented administrative service, strengthen institutional capacities, enhance the ability of public servants to respond effectively to change, and develop the quality of human resources. That is in their Mission 2020, which is based on the sets of previous investment that the Malaysia made. Now, the Malaysian experience, I don't have time to go into detail of that, The Malaysian experience shows that high level of investment in public sector capacity, which is one dimension of governance, has dividends. It has economic dividends, it has political dividends, and it has social dividends. Malaysia, a multi-ethnic society, which in the 60s nobody thought could be as stable and as advanced as it is today. I present to you the argument that among many reasons, the investment in public sector capacity was important. No, but why did it succeed? In many other countries, investments have been made as well. And I think in case of Malaysia, it was continuity of multi-party leadership of parties, proactive steps by the government to reduce inter-regional and inter-ethnic disparities among the three groups of society, heavy investment in education, health, and infrastructure, and rapid expansion of the economy, which was fueled by high resource base and local entrepreneurship. Another example is Indonesia, in a project of a public sector dimension of a very different nature. Indonesia, the largest Muslim country in the world, with many thousands of islands, large geographical area, authoritarian regime for 30 years, and very, very centralized, decided that they want to transform that into a decentralized administrative system. And in that regard, they decentralized power and resources to the provinces and municipalities and the local areas through the passage of a series of laws where the central government's administrative authorities were transferred to provinces, districts, and municipalities, except for foreign affairs, defense, security, judiciary, monetary and fiscal policy, and religious affairs. Today, again, I don't have time to go into detail of that, but there are 4 points about that I want to mention. Today, even though it's early, the assessment of Indonesian experience shows 4 positive impacts. Downsize central government and strengthen local administration. In the first 3 years, 2.5 million central government employees were reassigned to the regional government. For example,